Have you noticed how, even when everything seems fine, the heart can feel restless, the mind unsettled, and moments of pleasure vanish before they are fully savored? Why does irritation flare at small provocations or confusion cloud decisions that once felt simple? In the Anguttara Nikaya, the Buddha pointed to three forces that lie at the root of all suffering: Lobha, greed or craving; Dosa, aversion or anger; and Moha, delusion or confusion. These are the three poisons. They are subtle currents that quietly pollute the mind, shaping thought, speech, and action before awareness even arises. As long as you allow these poisons to operate within, true inner peace and happiness remain out of reach, while freedom can hardly arise. Craving pulls you outward, chasing fleeting pleasure, recognition, or comfort, yet fulfillment always slips away. Aversion pushes you against experience, rejecting discomfort and resisting what cannot be changed, magnifying the tension you feel. Delusion clouds your understanding, making what is impermanent seem permanent and what is insubstantial seem essential. To end suffering and attain inner peace, you must first recognize these three poisons as they arise within your mind. Notice their stirrings without judgment. Observe how they twist thought and shape action, and let awareness act as a gentle filter. In this mindful witnessing, craving loosens its pull, aversion softens its edge, and delusion begins to clear. Freedom does not come from force or renunciation, but from the quiet clarity that sees reality as it truly is, and in that seeing, the first sparks of peace awaken. Lobha, the habit of wanting. Life is often lived as though existence itself depends on accumulation. Objects, status, security, affection, recognition, each is pursued with the quiet hope that this will finally be enough. Yet attainment does not settle the heart, it sharpens it. What is gained today becomes the standard for tomorrow, and the sense of insufficiency quietly tightens its grip, as if fulfillment were always one step ahead. Over time, the mind trained in wanting loses the ability to recognize sufficiency. Even abundance is experienced as lack. People acquire more phones, larger homes, newer cars, higher titles, fuller calendars, often without the time or presence to inhabit what they already possess. A parent checks emails at the kitchen table while a child waits to share a drawing. A professional arrives home late, exhausted, staring at the couch as if it could contain the day's unspent hours. Each object gleams with promise, yet life slips past, unnoticed. The polished surface of a new phone, the glossy car, the uncluttered room, each radiates potential joy, yet the heart barely registers. Moments pass in quiet numbness while the mind chases the next glimmer. Homes become places of sleep rather than refuge. Comfort is owned but not felt. Life is filled yet never full. Lobha is not merely the desire for material things. It is the deeper habit of leaning toward experience with grasping. Wanting comfort when there is unease. Wanting certainty when there is ambiguity. Wanting permanence where change is unavoidable. The mind reaches outward instinctively, mistaking acquisition for stability, possession for safety, and pleasure for peace. This habit extends beyond objects. It shapes how love is received and returned. Time, care, and effort may be offered with sincerity, yet the mind trained in wanting searches immediately for more attention, more proof, more assurance, unable to rest in what has been freely given. Gratitude thins, appreciation fades. The the heart remains hungry, not because it lacks, but because it has learned to overlook sufficiency. Each moment of satisfaction reinforces the illusion. Relief arrives, brief, intoxicating, and disappears just as quickly. What remains is not contentment, but the memory of relief, which becomes fuel for the next pursuit. In this way, desire trains the mind to believe that happiness lies elsewhere. Never here, never now. Gratitude becomes fragile. Appreciation no longer settles. The heart continues to reach, even when nothing is missing. Lobha does not wound all at once. It erodes, slowly, almost imperceptibly. It teaches the mind to live perpetually in anticipation, always preparing for a future moment of fulfillment that never fully arrives. Presence thins. Ease becomes unfamiliar. Even success carries a subtle aftertaste of dissatisfaction. The mind flits from achievement to desire so quickly that laughter, taste, and quiet are noticed only in passing, as though life itself has become a backdrop to grasping. The Buddha identified Lobha as a root of suffering, not because wanting is immoral, but because it distorts perception. It convinces the mind that completeness is external, that well-being depends on conditions it cannot control. Under its influence, life becomes a sequence of reaches and retreats, hopes that surge, disappointments that follow, gains that never quite satisfy. As this pattern repeats, desire begins to harden into identity. You no longer merely want more. You become the person who must have more. Identity fuses with acquisition. Worth attaches itself to possession, recognition, or achievement. When these waver, as all conditioned things do, the sense of self wavers with them. What satisfies your desire does not end desire. It only teaches the mind what to chase next. The cost of Lobha is not only dissatisfaction, but the quiet loss of something essential, the capacity to rest, to receive, to feel enough. You forget how to stop leaning forward. Even moments of ease are approached with subtle grasping, as though they must be secured before they vanish. To see Lobha clearly is to notice this forward leaning of your mind, the constant anticipation, the inability to settle. Awareness does not suppress desire, it reveals its mechanics, and in that seeing, the grip of wanting begins to loosen, not through force or renunciation, but through understanding. When the habit of grasping is understood, your heart discovers that what it has been chasing was never missing, and in that recognition, your restless mind begins to rest in its own clarity, settling into a quiet, unshakable ease that was there all along. Dosa, the habit of resisting. In Buddhist teaching, dosa is recognized as the subtle habit of resisting. It is the mind's tendency to recoil from discomfort, frustration, or perceived harm. The difficulty lies not in the first flare of irritation, but in repetition. Each moment of resistance strengthens a subtle current in the mind, quietly influencing thought, speech, and action before awareness intervenes. Life is unpredictable. Some days are smooth, others stormy. Traffic snarls without warning. A child spills juice on a clean floor. A colleague speaks harshly, or a social media outage interrupts carefully planned work. You cannot control the rain, the road, or the words of others. Yet when aversion takes hold, every uncontrolled circumstance becomes a source of tension. Every minor inconvenience a weight on the heart. Each tiny irritation accumulates, shaping the day into a tapestry of tension and unrest. The more you resist what is, the more the mind tightens. pulling attention toward negativity and away from clarity. Dosa does not announce itself dramatically. It appears in quiet impatience, in the tight jaw when a deadline slips, in the silent irritation at the person who interrupts your plan. Even small dislikes, burnt toast, a late train, an unkind comment, become sparks for the habitual mind trained in resistance. Each spark reinforces the pattern. The mind recoils, complains, judges, or seeks escape. Life, seen through the lens of aversion, becomes a chain of grievances, each one confirming the sense that the world is against you. The Buddha taught that aversion is not a sin, nor a moral failing. It is a natural response that becomes harmful only when it is unexamined and repeated. The mind's resistance to impermanence, uncertainty, and the discomfort inherent in living produces subtle suffering that is almost invisible. Yet it accumulates like a shadow over every experience. To see dosa clearly is to notice the habitual recoil when life does not conform to expectation. It is the tightening of the chest at a delayed email, the impatience when a child demands attention in the middle of work, the irritation when a favorite show buffers endlessly. Awareness does not fight the irritation. It observes it. It notes how the mind pulls back from what cannot be changed, how resistance magnifies discomfort, and how the smallest frustrations can swell into restless dissatisfaction. Freedom from this suffering does not come from trying to control traffic, children, co-workers, or the weather. It arises from loosening the grip of resistance, from learning to meet life as it is. Like a sailor on the open ocean, some days the waves are calm, other days stormy. The skill is not in flattening the sea, but in moving with it, allowing the currents to carry you without losing your balance. When you stop pushing against the inevitable, the mind can finally rest. Storms are no longer permanent enemies, and calm is no longer a fleeting prize. Dosa erodes the mind slowly, subtly, teaching you to react automatically rather than respond with clarity. It amplifies frustration, fuels anger, and narrows attention to what is wrong instead of what is present. Yet, when you notice it, when the recoil, the tightness, the irritation are observed with gentle clarity, the pattern begins to loosen. Resistance is no longer the default. Discomfort can be met without amplifying it. Life's unpredictability becomes a teacher rather than a tormentor. In recognizing dosa, you discover a quiet power, the ability to meet whatever arises without being swept away. You realize that irritation and resistance are not permanent enemies, but habitual currents of the mind. By seeing them, you begin to move freely, even in stormy weather, and the tension that once dominated every inconvenience begins to soften. Moha, the habit of delusion. Delusion is subtle, pervasive, and quiet, yet it shapes every corner of life. It is the tendency to mistake what is uncertain for what is true, to read permanence into the fleeting, to take appearances as reality. Comfort is misread as security. A compliment is love. A moment of pleasure is lasting fulfillment. Moha clouds clarity, and without clarity, every step is taken in partial darkness. The Buddha called this moha, the habit of misunderstanding. It is not ignorance in the ordinary sense. It is the mind's persistent distortion of what arises and passes. The news that sparks outrage becomes a proof of injustice. A single misstep at work becomes a measure of competence. A fleeting smile from a child is interpreted as approval or disapproval. These small misreadings accumulate, weaving a web of expectation, fear, and disappointment. Moha interacts with the other poisons, subtly reinforcing them. Desire hardens when satisfaction is misunderstood. A promotion seems like freedom, but the long hours leave the heart restless. Aversion grows when imagined threats loom. A friend's curt message becomes evidence of betrayal. Each misperception strengthens the cycle, blinding you to what is present, amplifying suffering over what is not yet real, or what never will be. Life in the age of constant connection provides endless mirrors for Moha. You refresh your phone, waiting for a reply that never comes. Social media posts are read as judgments or comparisons, each scroll tightening invisible chains. You interpret a delayed response as rejection, a neutral comment as criticism, a paused video call as disinterest. Even a child's casual comment, "I'm bored," may spark anxiety, fear, or resentment. You assume motives, intentions, or patterns where none exist. Workplaces, families, and friendships all provide a stage for Moha. A colleague's brief tone, a partner's distracted glance, an overlooked email, all can ignite stories in the mind that bear little resemblance to reality. These stories, once formed, color attention and action, shaping thought, speech, and behavior in ways that perpetuate tension and dissatisfaction. Moha is not a single event. It is a habit. It teaches the mind to trust appearances over essence, to cling to certainty in a world of flux, to anchor hope in shadows. It is the reason a sunny day can feel gray when expectations are unmet, why a small mistake at home can spiral into hours of anxiety, why a perfectly adequate meal is eaten with dissatisfaction because it is not as imagined. Awareness of Moha begins with noticing these patterns without judgment. Observe the mind leaping to conclusions, inventing narratives, or confusing perception with truth. Recognize that uncertainty is inevitable, that impermanence is constant, and that not everything bears the weight you give it. Understanding Moha does not stop events from unfolding, but it stops the mind from amplifying them unnecessarily. When Moha is seen clearly, the heart begins to rest in what is, rather than chasing what seems. The mind stops spinning stories that pull desire and aversion into motion before experience is even grasped. The distortions dissolve gradually like fog under the morning sun, and in that light, the first stirrings of insight and ease quietly arise. How the three poisons reinforce each other. The three poisons are not isolated forces. They entwine and amplify one another, forming patterns that shape the mind and condition every experience. Lobha pulls you outward, chasing what seems necessary: status, pleasure, recognition, while Moha blurs perception, convincing you that fulfillment lies in the next acquisition, the next moment, the next approval. Each grasping movement fuels delusion. You believe the world owes satisfaction, that permanence can be secured, that control is possible where it is not. Dosa arises naturally when the world does not conform to expectation. The resistance of life, the child who spills juice, the colleague who misses a deadline, the traffic that delays your commute, provokes irritation, frustration, or anger. This aversion is magnified by Lobha, which has already attached your happiness to outcomes, and by Moha, which interprets events through distorted lenses of threat or injustice. Every unmet expectation becomes a small fire, every perceived slight another ember, feeding a pattern of tension and unrest. Similarly, Moha subtly manipulates Lobha and Dosa, delusion convinces you that a fleeting pleasure secures lasting happiness, or that discomfort is a permanent threat. Desire is hardened by misunderstanding, aversion intensified by imagined harm, and each misperception quietly reinforces the habit of suffering. A delayed message feels like rejection. A minor mistake becomes catastrophe. A modest success appears insignificant. The mind is conditioned to overreact, to crave more, to resist what cannot be changed, all while mistaking appearances for reality. This interplay explains why life can feel heavy, even when external conditions appear favorable. The mind trained in these habits moves in circles. Craving pulls, aversion pushes, and delusion clouds the path. Peace remains elusive because the poisons are feeding each other, silently perpetuating the cycle of unrest. The Buddha's insight is not to suppress desire, anger, or confusion, but to see them clearly. Awareness interrupts the automatic interplay of Lobha, Dosa, and Moha. You begin to recognize the forward pull of wanting, the inward resistance of aversion, and the subtle distortions of delusion. In that seeing, the cycle softens. You notice the mechanics without being swept away. The habits that once drove thought, speech, and action begin to loosen, and a space of clarity and ease opens, a place where freedom is possible and suffering begins to subside. Returning to the roots, ethics as freedom. The Buddha did not present morality as a set of rules imposed from outside, nor as a burden to bear. Ethical conduct is not about punishment, obligation, or approval. It is a path to clarity, a framework that nurtures freedom. The precepts, the guidance in thought, word, and deed, act like a compass, steering the mind away from the currents of Lobha, Dosa, and Moha. They are not restrictions, but invitations to see the mechanisms of your own heart, to recognize the subtle patterns that bind you, and to move with steadiness rather than reaction. When greed, aversion, and delusion dominate, even small choices become entangled. Words slip into blame or manipulation. Actions reinforce craving or resistance. The mind, clouded by desire and misunderstanding, moves automatically, often unaware of the consequences of its own impulses. By contrast, ethical awareness creates space, a pause between impulse and action, allowing discernment to guide response. Speaking truthfully, acting with kindness, and respecting life are not mere moral ideals. They are practical tools that reveal the habitual currents of your own mind. Consider generosity. Giving with discernment does not mean abandoning self-care. It means offering with clarity, without expectation of repayment or recognition. This practice weakens Lobha, loosens the hold of craving, and nurtures ease. Consider patience in the face of irritation, the restraint of harsh words when anger rises. Here, dosa meets its counterforce: mindfulness, observation, and choice. And when delusion clouds understanding, ethical reflection, asking, what is the true impact of this action, guides perception back toward reality, revealing moha in its subtle forms. Ethics, in this light, is not restriction, but freedom. It frees the mind from the automatic pulls of the poisons, from the endless cycles of grasping, resisting, and misunderstanding. Each intentional act rooted in awareness, whether small or great, becomes a way to untangle habitual patterns, to reclaim agency over thought, speech, and action. In this way, morality is not a ceiling that limits life. It is the foundation on which life can be lived fully, with clarity, ease, and presence. Freedom does not arrive as a sudden liberation from all difficulty. nor does it erase the natural fluctuations of life. Rain will fall, schedules will slip, misunderstandings will arise, and the mind will still stir. But ethics, rooted in insight and awareness, allows you to meet each moment without being swept away. It is the practice of returning to the roots, observing the poisons, understanding their influence, and choosing action that nourishes clarity and peace. Through this, the path of freedom is walked not as an abstract goal, but in every conscious choice, every mindful step, every measured breath. If this wisdom resonates with you, please like this video and subscribe to join us on the path of conscious living